So 8 years ago, I was on a retreat, Eros and Beauty in the Spiritual Life, led by Subhuti and Padmavajra. And on that retreat, I ended up getting a cold. In those days, a cold was just a cold. And I was in a tussle with myself as to whether I'd go to the first meditation or not. Anyway, I ended up going, and it was in the Adhisthana shrine room. And just as I was starting to meditate, I had this voice, or this communication, which said, you must go to Tivatnaloka, and you must go now. And I'm not sure I can completely describe. It felt like a world opened up, and there was like a knowing that went beyond my just regular everyday consciousness. And then I recall just kind of thinking, oh, what about my mum? And there was this communication that just went, go because you'll need to come back. And in that moment, just everything made sense. I couldn't sit for the second meditation because I was literally shook up, actually. But I knew immediately that I was going to go to Tivatnaloka. And just to say, I had been invited to go, but for various reasons I thought I couldn't. I just thought I couldn't go. And I wanted to share this because I sometimes think maybe we think all of us needs to be behind ourselves to act. And going forth isn't always that easy. So I thought I was going to frame my talk a bit around a sutta that I really like, which is called What is Difficult to Do in the Spiritual Life. And it's a conversation between Shariputra and a wanderer called the Rose Apple Gatherer. And it's from the Samyutta Nikaya. So it's a conversation between friends. So this guy, the wanderer, asks Shariputra, he says, what's difficult to do in the spiritual life, in the Dharma life? And Shariputra says, going forth is difficult to do in the spiritual life. So he says, okay, so once one's gone forth, what's difficult then? And Shariputra replies, friend, to find delight. To find delight is difficult to do in one who's gone forth. So he says, okay, so once one's found delight, what's difficult then? And Shariputra says, friend, to practice the Dharma, to really practice the Dharma. That's what's difficult then. So then he says, okay, so once you've gone forth, you're finding delight, you're really practicing the Dharma, will it take long? Will it take long to get enlightened? And Shariputra says, friend, not long. Yeah, not long. Anyway, I wanted to share that because I think actually the process of going forth, which is what I'm going to try and unpack, has sort of followed that journey. So I recognize Bhante's description of the gravitational force of the conditioned. So I said I thought I'd put the decision of going to Tivatnaloka down, and then the retreat really opened that up. And the reason why was, actually I was very established in my context in Colchester. I felt I was quite effective there. People didn't want me to go necessarily. And there was, in a way, a deeper pull towards security and probably comfort. You know, I sort of knew what I was doing there, and I wouldn't have had a clue. I didn't quite have a clue at Tivatnaloka. So the retreat opened up, in a way, a deeper longing, and that was to follow the Dharma wherever it may take me. It sort of uncovered that kind of a greater confidence in that than kind of a security. And just to say, I wanted to go as well because I felt deeply grateful to Tivatnaloka. It was pivotal in my ordination training process. People really took me on there. And I really wanted to give back. I feel a lot of gratitude to that context ongoingly. So just moving on, so having gone forth, what's difficult to do then? So it's really interesting, Shariputra says, to find delight in the going forth. So I've been reflecting on that, and just to say I really love Tivatnaloka. I love people coming on retreat there and seeing them just ripen and just see the system of practice being so effective. Gives me a lot of faith and confidence. But going forth itself can have a depth charge, so that momentum and positivity can create space for something else to come up really, generally for integration. So I went forth, and there I was. So I wanted to, so what came up actually was the imposter. So I went there, and that's what came up, and if imposter doesn't make sense, it was like a sense of, not good enough, that might make more sense. So I thought I'd share a model with you, because I'm sure I'm not on my own with that. And I think sometimes actually, for some of us, a lack of confidence might stop us from contributing to a bigger context. That was part of my reason for wanting to share this as well. So one way of working with the difficulty, whatever that might be, there was a model that Chandraprabha used that I found very helpful, and I just wanted to share that with you. So one way of working with a difficulty is to kind of look at it from, one's conditioning. What is it in me that's getting triggered? Look at where it's coming from. And another way is to kind of draw on my ideals. So it's not quite one or the other, and I'll unpack that a little bit more. But what I sort of found is if I turned too much towards the difficulty on my conditioning, particularly around the imposter thing, I could get a bit lost in that, or even problematize, or even try harder in a certain sort of way to try and overcome that. Yet at the same point, if I turned a bit too strongly towards my ideals, it was a bit like I didn't want to see the messy parts of myself, or even use a spiritual experience to kind of cover over what was kind of going on. So it's probably a really obvious thing to say, but it's taken some kind of journeying, that the spiritual life is really about growth, and it's been about holding those sides of myself, bringing all of me along. And I guess what I'm talking about is the tension between the ideal and where I'm actually at, or parts of myself are actually at. So this subtle polarity that seems to be in experience. And the imposter, so I could look at the imposter as my conditioning, or just, there isn't really a self, that's conceit. We can definitely do those side by side. But it's a helpful way of just bringing those two along and seeing in a way the subtle polarity in experience. And the imposter is just underpinned by a success-failure kind of framework, really. So I think this is why Shariputra says we need to find delight in the going forth. Because although it's positive in the long run, in the short run it can be a bit turbulent and a bit difficult. And I think Subhuti describes this as dukkha of the path. One becomes more sensitive to what's actually going on. And just to say, a real source of delight, and what's really helped me in this has been friendship. So seeing the people that I've worked with work with their conditionings, but not reduce their aspirations or ideals, has been extremely inspiring, actually. And it's helped me to see that I'm neither totally spiritual, nor am I a sum of my habits and conditions. So seeing people further ahead has given me a lot of faith in what's possible, what real commitment looks like, I guess, in the ups and downs of the spiritual life. And my vertical friendships, my preceptors and my KMs have really exemplified and embodied something for me that's given me a lot of faith in just being able to try and take the next creative step. So for myself, living and working together at Tivatnaloka, being in the same chapter, has allowed me to take things further and tackle personal maras, often move into uncharted territories, to take more risks, things I would just resist, left to my own devices, to be honest. And also it's a lot of fun. Rajatara's over there, and sometimes how we communicate more deeply is by sharing songs. We get to know how we really are through listening to a tune. So the learning for me has just been really trying to be myself as much as possible, ideally my best self, of course, but to be myself with as many people and to support others to do the same. So I'm describing, in a way, an intensity of practice that has allowed me to touch into, I think the context at Tivatnaloka in particular. I was chatting with Singamati the other day, or quite a while ago, and just saying it's allowed me to touch into a potential in myself that I haven't really been in contact with, and to really see that in others. And it's from this kind of resonance, in a way, that at its best our retreats run as part of a team. It's out of that that the retreats unfold, which is a a great joy. It's not just about studying the Dharma, it's sort of embodied living together. So coming back to Shariputra, having gone forth and having found a light, what's difficult to do then? So it's interesting, Shariputra says, friend, practice in accordance with the Dharma. So to really practice the Dharma. You think if you've going forth and going for refuge, two sides of the same coin. So you think you would be practicing the Dharma. So it's interesting, isn't it? So I guess it's at ever deeper levels. And I think there's a danger, we can end up trying to manage samsara with our Dharma life, and I definitely don't want to be doing that. So what does that mean to me, really, to try and practice more deeply in accordance with the Dharma? Well, a month ago, Parami somewhere, Parami was leading an ordination retreat at Tiratnaloka, and it's really quite something to have. So we were the public, we were able to go to the public ordinations. And it's a great delight, just a joy to have been part of some people's process, most people's process there, the team as well, and then to see people's cases go round their necks. It's the atmosphere, I'm sure we all have a sense of, it's sort of out of this world. There's a degree of, going for refuge that's so embodied that it's just a great sense of interconnectivity. So for myself, living at Tiratnaloka, I'm constantly reminded of my own ordination, and I feel really grateful to be ordained, actually. And what that means to me at the minute, or what I've been trying to unfold a little bit more in the minute, I've been reflecting on, my commitment, the samaya I took at my ordination, more in terms of the three duties of an order member. So I'm just going to share a little bit of that with you. So a recent order gathering, I was trying to think, God, what would be helpful to try and share here? And those three duties were really alive for me. So I thought I'd ask some of my friends if they knew what they were. And I asked about 17 people, and 15 people didn't know. So I thought I'd just share them with you. So Subhuti has drawn them out in a booklet, What is the Order? And the duties are embodied in the image of what we're trying to do together collectively in the 1,000 Dharmadavakateshvara. So, and Vajrasakya, I think, described the three duties as the three loves. So the first love is to one's own practice, or duty to one's own practice, which is represented by Avalokiteshvara holding the Chintamani to his heart. And the second duty is duty to the order embodied by the body and the 11 heads of Avalokiteshvara. And the third duty is duty to the world, which is represented by the 1,000 arms, all going out in the different directions, our altruistic dimension. So just to say, the first and the third duty have always been really clear to me. It's just made a lot of sense that I've needed to continue to grow and develop. There's quite a bit that I need to still work on. And that I really want to help others. So, I need conditions for my to keep moving forward, retreats, chapter meetings, confession practice, and I know it's going to look different for all of us. And the third duty of reaching out to the world, I worked in the NHS prior to coming to Tiratnaloka, so I'd never lived in community and I'd never worked in team-based right livelihood, so it was quite a deep dive. But I'd worked in the NHS for 15 years and I really wanted to help people, help try and alleviate suffering in the world. And working at Tiratnaloka, I feel, is a continuation of that. People joining the order, I think, will make a really, really big difference to the world. So obviously these three duties aren't separate, but the second duty, order as practice, has sometimes been more mysterious. And I've wondered whether maybe I've got more control over the first and the third, like I've got control over whether I meditate or not, and I've probably got some control over whether I spend time with someone or not, or I'm kind or not. But the second duty maybe is a bit more mysterious and you don't quite know what's going to happen at times. So I've been just sort of thinking, why was that duty a bit more mysterious? And I was thinking of the tantric teaching of inner, outer and secret. So I haven't completely thought this through, so hopefully this works. So the inner aspect may be like our names or sadhana. and the outer aspects, sort of thinking Tivatnaloka, institutions, our centres, our communication with one another. And then the more mysterious aspect, the secret aspect, is Bhante's vision that through collectively, with our shared ideals, working together, cooperating, we can bring something much greater into being, the bodhicitta. And he describes what the order needs is our roots in the sky. That's where that line has come from the bodhisattva ideal, that we're more than what we seem, and collectively we're even more than that. And Padmavajra had mentioned in his talk, the vision of Sangha as this vital mutual responsiveness. And I was thinking that's what I really more and more just want to try and live out, really. But there's a challenge in that. There's a real challenge in communication. For me anyway, I guess. And I think I've really needed to go forth from patterns of either holding back and not saying anything, or then over asserting myself, like that, that can go on, that kind of polarity can go on. And what's really helped in that has been friendship, living with people and really seeing people embodying that and working that out. But what's really helped through just trying to go a bit deeper in communication and trying to be a bit fearless and be really curious and understanding and really listen to people has been sort of just trusting connection, even if there's disagreement. So I think sometimes disagreement for me can feel very discombobulating, or I can get discombobulated. But it's just been about really trusting that actually fundamentally we're going for refuge and there's a deeper connection at play. And when I can, in a way what that's describing is being willing to step forward, because stepping backward can result in me falling into deeper subjectivity. And the more I can kind of do that, the more I can bridge the gap of polarization, inner and outer. So working at Tivatnaloka, supporting women, supporting practitioners in their process of preparing for ordination, I've seen sort of more and more that what the world really needs is a Sangha, is an order. And I might come to a bit of the limits of how I can communicate this, but I've really seen sort of more deeply, I mean, it should probably be obvious, but anyway, I'm just sort of sharing my journey, that in order for the first and the third duty to really be actualized in the fullest, the second is extremely vital. And I don't know whether I'll be able to communicate this really well, but I wanted to share a really personal example of this. So I'd really dreaded how it would be for my mum and me when she passed, when she died. She'd been unwell actually for quite a period of time, and there was quite a lot of complexity to it. However, for a bit of time after my mum passed, I felt in contact with something that went a bit beyond. I felt in contact with something that sort of went a bit beyond life and death, really. There was this sort of deeper intimacy with life, I think. So there were real moments of that, I guess I'm describing moments where I wasn't there in a certain sort of way, and it felt really quite blissful at times. So I sort of know that state of consciousness is possible, and I know that it's self-clinging that kind of closes it down. Just to say, I also had times of quite big grief, so I don't want to make it sound like it was just one. It's never just one. And yet a memory of just a greater love really remains. But so this experience might sound like these experiences sometimes are sort of out of time and space. They don't seem to be associated to anything. But when I really reflected upon this experience, I just wanted to share some of the conditions that might have contributed to that. So I know conditionality isn't causality, but I think these are some of the conditions that contributed to that. So I was on a three-week Transcendental Principle retreat. I was supporting a 3-week Transcendental Principle retreat that was running at Tivatnaloka. Anyway, my mum started to decline, and I couldn't fully assess from that distance how things were going. And she also didn't want me to leave the retreat. So I asked my friend Urgyen, who was helping us, supporting us to run that retreat, whether she would go down and just assess the situation for me to see if I needed to come back or not. So anyway, she travelled from Wales to Tilbury and visited my mum, for a couple of days, and it became clear that I really needed to come back, and take care of my mum. So I had 2 weeks left of this retreat to go. So I phoned Dharma Mega, who I don't think is here actually. I phoned Dharma Mega and she rearranged, you know how hard it is to rearrange in Buddhist life? 2 weeks. She rearranged her whole thing and just dropped everything to come and cover this retreat for me. I'm nearly done. I was told 20 minutes. So she did that. The community gave me a car so that I could just travel down and see my mum and travel backwards and forwards. And I think Kaliatita gave me £10 for snacks for the journey. So I was just loaded, many people helped in many different ways. And then right at the end, actually, of the time of my mum's passing, I didn't really know what I needed or who would be there. Chandraprabha drove from Tiratnaloka, finishing community days, and stayed up the whole night with me. So she drove from Wales to Basildon, stayed up the whole night, then made sure that I got home safely. So I wanted to share this with you, not to kind of point towards the second duty being sort of inward-looking, but I think that kind of support and love has really allowed me to deepen my own practice and also to more effectively continue to go out to others. And I think just 15 years ago, I think if my mum had passed, I'm not even sure I'd ever been able to keep my life on track. That's kind of where I was at. So just to end, going forth can be a challenge. The Dharma life can be a bit of a challenge at times. Going forth for me has involved really going forth from my limited sense of comfort and security to my heart's deepest longing, which is to really serve the Dharma. And I've come more and more to realise that that's, serving the order so that we can really deepen our own practice and go out into the world. So just to finish, Shariputra says, if one's gone forth, found a light, practising in accordance with the Dharma, will it take long? Apparently not long. I think with good friends, it'll be all right. That's it.